Hello and welcome to another episode or video, depending on whether you are listening or watching, of course. So today I thought we'd talk a little bit about rules and boundaries. This is something that I've been thinking a lot more about lately, and also something that's been a struggle for me for quite some time. Because I was originally home educated as a child, I have a slightly different perspective on rules and boundaries because essentially there weren't as many because I wasn't within the school system, and the school system is very much based around rules and boundaries because, as I've said before, if you have 30 children in a class or 200 children in a school playing field, you need strong rules and boundaries, otherwise chaos will ensue. Particularly if those children have been cooped up in lessons at desks for most of the day. So there are places where rules and boundaries are necessary. But most of my perspective is based around reducing the number of rules and boundaries wherever possible. I mean, rules serve a certain purpose. And depending on they tend to be on a spectrum. So there are rules that affect basically our safety, and then there's rules that are more socially constructed. So example of rules that are affecting safety are rules around using knives. Now, I'm a very big proponent for having firm rules and firm boundaries when it's using knives. I have my 3 rules and ancillary things. If there's a child that they is willfully not listening to those rules, then it is my responsibility as a leader to remove them from that task. So there are consequences to that rule, and there are firm boundaries. It's you use a knife like this when you're with me, or you don't use it at all. And that's because potentially a mistake, a transgression of these rules could be life-threatening. So in that space, it is very clear that we need rules and boundaries. But then you can look at it at the other end of the spectrum. Another rule that a school or parent might have is that if you play outside, you don't jump in puddles because you'll get muddy. Now, this is very much a socially constructed, and as most forest school leaders would say, there's very little harm in getting muddy. I mean, getting muddy and wet when you are a long way from civilization, that's a different story. So say if you're out in the wilderness in the middle of winter, paddling around a river is probably not the cleverest thing to do because you don't have the ability to get warm, you've got dangers of hypothermia. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about, say, getting wet and muddy on a day like this. You can tell I've got short sleeves on. We're going to hit 24, 25 degrees, which is nothing massive for most of the world. But here in the UK, it's very nice indeed. But in the state, there's less mud around, but there's still bits and pieces. And if children get wet and muddy, as long as they are not ruining clothes, and that my argument would be that they're not wearing suitable clothes for the activity, i.e. being outside. So a rule that someone would put in place if they were concerned about the children getting their clothes dirty was don't play in the mud, don't jump in puddles. So we can see that there's ends of the spectrum, and there's things that sit in between. I mean, most forest schools I know will have core rules around be kind to each other, be kind to the environment, and look after yourself. And those are very good rules. And I prefer those kind of rules that are very broad, as opposed to a laundry list of you can't do this, you can't do that, don't run, don't climb trees, don't swing, don't walk around with sticks, don't. You can see that a lot of children's lives are just based on don'ts rather than what they can actually do. So I'm at a core level against that. I think children should have as much freedom as possible There should be boundaries, because healthy boundaries make for healthy children and good, competent adults. But at the same time, we do sometimes take it too far. Now, I'm pretty lucky with the groups that I work with, the home educating families. They are generally amazing. Some incredible children, incredible parents, and the parents manage the children very well, and the children are in general what most society would consider relatively well behaved. So, I mean, I haven't had to, for much of the forest school, put in many rules and boundaries. I did right at the start. So when I first established this forest school that I've been running for 2 years now, I made a big thing about setting boundaries. We had coloured string and we tied around the area. First thing we did was we walked around and we checked all the boundaries. Okay, we're not going further than this string, we're not going further than that string, we're not going up that path, or that path. But I found that the children didn't really want to. They were comfortable staying around the main camp. They were comfortable being in sight of parents, and so gradually I stopped bothering with the string. I stopped bothering with the boundary. And when someone new joined, I'd just say, well, make sure you can see the tarp. And the onus during these sessions is that the parents do keep an eye on the children. There's only one of me. There's a lot of children. I can't keep an eye on all of them. So it's kind of like parents start looking out for all the children as a whole, and it works really well. Like I say, I work with amazing families. But now that some of these children have been here for 1.5 years, now they want to push those boundaries. They want to go further. They want to see further things, and they have their confidence to do it. So now I'm going, okay, well, maybe we need to come back to the subject of boundaries. We didn't before, and now we do. Should I have maintained those boundaries through the whole thing? Maybe. Boundaries are good if they're consistent. Another example of the way things can sometimes change is that I have a tool bag where I carry the axes and saws in. Because the axes and saws are quite long, I haven't yet found a good method of securing those in a locked toolbox. The knives and smaller stuff, they go in a locked toolbox that has a padlock that is very clearly secure. Now, it's been habit for me because I have those well-mannered children, the children that understand at a core strength what is dangerous and what is not. Go, okay, I can put the axe back in its sheath and then put it in the tool bag, close the top of the tool bag, and I know that no child is going to go rummaging that without permission. Up until they do. So in hindsight, that was something that needed to be a boundary earlier, but it wasn't an issue because of the children, and that was where you start adjusting rules and boundaries. I mean, you can't anticipate everything that a child's going to do, but you can reasonably work out what are the important things and what is dangerous, what is likely to cause harm, and we can design rules around that. So that we can then further divide the rules that need to be created into rules that we as adults create and children that create. The ones that adults need to create are generally based around things where the children are not yet at a developmental stage to be able to manage that themselves. They either can't see the danger developmentally, or they're just not as aware of it. There are periods in children's lives where they are less risk averse or they developmentally can't see risk. I mean, there's a whole study that found that children under a certain age can't judge the speed of oncoming traffic. So what they think is leaving them enough space to cross the road isn't necessarily so. So therefore, we would have to, as practitioners, as parents, as responsible adults, we would have to put in rules and boundaries, and those are like, okay, well, we're going to check a couple of times, we're going to make sure there's a good distance, and then we're going to go. So that's one category of rules. And then the other category is the ones that we encourage the children to form themselves. this is something that I've done a whole lot of research on, but it's something that I'm just starting to apply now that I have a more consistent group, and that we are starting to see dynamics emerge, dynamics that may need to be shaped a bit more. At this point, I'm clear that we need to have a bit more of a discussion on what is considered within the group to be acceptable behavior during a game. Results physical contact and everything else, and we're going to need to draw up essentially rules based around that, because I can see that there are flashpoints, and I can see that while for the most part I'm encouraging them to deal with things themselves, children do need a little bit of help to kind of start developing those rules and realize that it's kind of developing that empathy, kind of going, okay, well, you may think this rule is completely fair, and this way of creating rules, like there's a child that will just create rules, apply them to everyone else, and they get upset when they don't, when the other children don't keep to those rules. A discussion there is around empathy. Okay, well, how would you feel if the rules were made for you? And this is our role as then adults and leaders in this space, is to kind of scaffold that, is to go, okay, well, we can talk about this, we can kind of encourage that empathy, kind of encourage the different points of view, that, and then formulate rules on that, and then hopefully we can turn over the rule making process a bit more to the children. I mean, that's ideal, that's what we want, to turn out well-adjusted, competent members of the human race. Means people taking responsibility for themselves, and it also means being able to apply self-regulation, being able to develop and maintain rules and deal with conflict. We shouldn't be relying on a higher power to tell us what is right and what is wrong. We should be able to formulate that amongst ourselves. So those are the skills I'm trying to foster. I'm still, as I say, I'm not an expert on this. There's areas of that, because I'm generally a very easygoing, friendly person. It's a lot more of a struggle to deal with conflict, to deal with things based around rules, and so this is an area that I'm working on and developing. And who knows, I might come up with some more insights, I might change direction completely. But this is kind of my perspective, and we'll likely get into some more discussions. There's a podcast guest that I'm interested to get on the podcast around the subject of rules, which should be really interesting. So keep an eye out for that. Hoping to get her on for this. But yeah, it's always developing and always on the move. So be interested to hear if you've got any perspectives on rules and rule making and so on. Really interested to hear thoughts. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening and watching. Remember to make the most of every day, and I'll see you all next time.